Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, and we're going to talk about authority on a subject from a game designer perspective, from Wizards of the Coast perspective, and specifically what was done in Fizbans' Treasury of Dragons on dragon birth and dragon death, and how it's presented in the game, and how I think they got it wrong. Wizards of the Coast game designers got it wrong, okay? And how you would get it right, and how they got it wrong was not actually connected to game design, but is connected to a cultural deficiency in America today. Let's go! All right. So first of all, before I talk a lot of smack about game design in Fizbans' Treasury of Dragons, I want to make it super clear. 5 out of 5 stars. I am absolutely loving Fizbans' Treasury of Dragons. 5 out of 5. Well, if you're like, well, if there's this really sucky part of the book, how could it be 5 out of 5 stars? Well, I think when it comes to Dungeons & Dragons books, new 256-page 5th edition core books that are either, a core book, the PHB, the DMG, the MM, a utility book like Xanathar's or Tasha's, or Fizbans. Fizbans is a utility book. It's possible you could say that the Fizbans Treasury of Dragons is an extension of the Monster Manual. I get that, right? So it might even actually, yeah. Then there's setting books, and there's, like Eberron is a setting book, and then there are adventures, right? Which would be like Storm King's Thunder, right? So if I put out my $50, am I getting $50 worth? And I'll tell you right now, I think a lot of the, Fizbans, Treasury of Dragons, I would say the actual value of this book is $350. If I spent $400, I'd be upset. If I spent $350 and got Fizbans, Treasury of Dragons, I was like, yeah, I got my value, my money's worth, right? Because the reason why is I can use this book in, literally, I probably use this book in 3 campaigns, right? And D&D is my main, it's the best use of my free time, right? And it is also very transformative in how it helps me. This book is fantastic. All right. All that said, let's get into it. They got it very, very wrong in the Dragon Origin and Dragon Death. Okay. So first of all, the problem that they did was they did not present how dragons are born and how dragons are die with authority. They did it with schmuck. They did it as a schmuck, right? And I'll explain why. Okay. All right. So first of all, when you go to the dragon's entries in this book, they're fantastic. Right. So let's talk about the Amethyst Dragon. Right. There is a stat block for the Wormling. Right. There is a stat block for the young Amethyst Dragon. There is a stat block for the adult Amethyst Dragon, and there is a stat block for the Ancient Dragon. And when it comes to HP, it says, 60 HP, 120 HP, 180 HP, 240 HP, right? It's not like whatever you want it to be, man. It's not some hippie nonsense answer, right? It's a real answer, right? And they're like, hey, if people are going to run these things, they need to know how many hit points, right? Well, here's the problem, okay? So if you look at the stat blocks, Dungeons & Dragons is speaking with authority, right? Now, I think the reason why the Dungeons & Dragons game designers are speaking with authority in the stat blocks is it is established. None of this mealy-mouthed, I don't know what do you think the value should be, right? Stat blocks don't work like that in Dungeons & Dragons. They never have. They're hard numbers, hard facts, right? That's the way it is, right? You don't wonder how many attacks the creature has. It tells you, right? It says it with authority, right? But when it comes to how a dragon is born and how a dragon dies in Fizban, there is a death table in Fizban, and it says, dragons die in different ways, and you can roll on this table below. And then, or you could choose how dragons die in your world, right? Now, this is a mistake. And it's the same with birth. There's the birth table is 1d10, and there's 10 different sources on how a dragon is born, and 10 different ideas on how a dragon is born, and all the ideas are super awesome. I love them. Actually, I did have one beef with those, but that's not this video. They actually, the vast majority of them are very good. One of them could have been redone. I don't want to get distracted, but they're not bad. My complaint is not the ideas on these tables. There's a D6 death table. What happens when a dragon dies? 1d6. This is what happens. Then there's a 1d10. right? It's like 1d10. This is what happens when a dragon dies. This is what happens when a dragon is born, right? 10 different ideas, right? I like the content. I'm like very cool with the content. I think this is really neat. Great, right? But the problem is I don't like this pick your own. I hate it, right? And here's why. These are important, right? And so one, it acknowledges in the book how many worlds there are, like Tarkir, Dragonlance, Faerun, Eberron. It talks about these worlds, right? So tell me how dragons die on those worlds, right? Put it in ink and say, in Faerun, this is how a dragon dies. When they die, this effect occurs, right? Like, all water is fouled for, 1d10 miles around it. Or spells can't be cast for 7 days, or whatever it is. Say it with authority, right? And the reason, and you telling me I can pick, I don't need you to tell me that. And the reason why is the Dungeon Master Guide, page 4, already established this. It said, the rules are not in charge, you are in charge. I already know I can throw out anything that Wizards of the Coast establishes, right? So what I want to know is I want Wizards of the Coast to establish it, right? Set the stake in the ground, right? And then I will change it if I want to. I don't need you wasting space in the book to say you could do what I already told you to do in the Dungeon Master Guide, page 4, literally 7 years ago. We came out in 2014. Page 4. The rules aren't in charge, you're in charge was established 7 years ago. Don't waste book space telling me that. Give me a hard answer on how dragons die in Faerun, how dragons die in Eberron. What happens when a dragon dies in Tarkir? What happens when a dragon dies per world, right? Set it in stone. Give it to me. Now, why doesn't Dungeons & Dragons designers set this stuff in stone? Well, there is a massive, massive problem with two problems, right, in America. I think there's two major problems in America today. There is systemic low self-esteem. Like, just across the world, everybody's like, I'm not ready for leadership. I'm not ready to give an authoritative answer. Why would my answer be more valuable than another person's answer? I suck, right? Like, the whole world is saying it. Now, clearly, J. Scott Garibay don't have this problem, right? I'm like, yeah, I got the right answer on most questions, and I'm going to give it to you. And you can come at me in the comments below. People certainly do, right? Like I say it with authority, and I stand by what I say, and I take the barbs as they come, right? Like, and the only limits I have on that is if you're no longer aiming at me, but are aiming at somebody who's not me, right? Like, and so that's kind of where that's my take, right? So, and I don't have low self-esteem. This is definitely not something I struggle with, right? Like, I think a lot of myself. In fact, I think, I'm on the other side, right? Like, arrogance and pride, we have to watch for that. I do watch for that, right? The only reason I roll as hard as I do and say I'm as awesome as I am is because I want to keep creating. And honestly, I will say, that's another thing. I honestly think if you don't think you're a good and cool person, you ain't gonna be able to create nothing, because you're gonna assume nobody wants what you have, and frankly, you probably are right. All right, so I feel like you need confidence to create, and I want to create. I want to put things out into the world. My D&D commentary is one thing I've created. I've created a tabletop role-playing game. You can find it in the links below. I've created 2 novels, right? I create, right? Like, and so I think this low self-esteem thing is very, very bad, and people just got to be like, I'm the shiznit. Like, that's it. Like, I have value, and my ideas are cool, and I'm gonna rule this world, right? Like, you got to embrace it, right? The other one is, if you're ever going to create anything, right? If you're going to be a valuable creator, you've got to do that. And if you're a dungeon master, you're a creator. Guess what? They're like, all right. So you cannot dungeon master without confidence. You cannot, all right? You're dungeon gooding or you're dungeon okaying, but you aren't dungeon mastering if you don't have a good outlook on yourself and see your own value. I firmly believe that, okay? All right. Now, let's talk about this authority issue, right? Everybody in the world, not in the world, everybody in America is running from authority like crazy. It is just an absolutely, it's so constant and pervasive, and it's just a thing. Like, everybody is running from authority like nuts. Nobody wants the leader slot. It is shocking to me how, like, I was at a wedding the other day, and this dude's, he's like, yeah, I work at a chemical plant, right? And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And he's like, yeah, but my boss just quit, man. And I'm like, great. Hey, you gonna step up? You gonna take his slot? And the guy goes, no, I can't take his slot. My boss builds $10 and $20 million, chemical factories, right? Like, I'm not ready for that. And I'm like, dude, man, it's right there. Just grasp it, take it, move, right? Like, and like, no, I can't be the leader. I can't be I can't be the top slot. I'm just too frightened. And I'm like, dude, grasp it, take it, run, and the whole world is just filled with people backing away from authority and not wanting to be the leader, right? And what happens? We end up with we end up with Joe Biden, right? Like, come on, it's frustrating. It's just frustrating. So I want game designers to take their authority. You tell me how, if you're a Dungeons & Dragons game designer, tell me how a dragon dies and is born in every world, right? You have the authority. I need you to pick it up and believe in yourself and take the authority and take the barbs when people say you were wrong, right? Rather than go, oh, here's my hippie answer of whatever you think is right, and enjoy this hummus and these Birkenstocks, right? Like, pick a lane. Believe in yourself and put things and set things into place and let the world push against it, right? But don't give me a pudding of mess saying that you don't know how dragons were born and you don't know how dragons die. Like, I want to know. You have the authority to set it, right? And I have the authority given to me on page 4 of the DMG in 2014 in Dungeons & Dragons 5e. I know I have the authority to change it. You don't need to waste space in the book telling me that, right? And you also don't need to waste space in the book telling me that you don't know who you are, you don't have confidence in yourself, and you don't want to be, and you're another person running from authority. Dungeons & Dragons designers need to act like they have authority over this world, and they need to set it into place. That's my opinion. What do you think? Do you agree or disagree with me? Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.